All right, B-listers, you know the drill.
This is your official spoiler alert for the episode.
If you don't want any spoilers, stop the episode now.
And if you don't care about spoilers, hold on to your seats because this episode starts
Now. Hello, fellow B-listers.
Hi, welcome to the B Critics podcast. We're your hosts, Liz and Court.
And our guest critic for this episode is Annika. Hi, Annika.
Hello.
Hi,
So-
welcome.
Yeah. Annika is one of our really good friends. We've all gotten close. We run in the same friend group. Annika's now husband is one of my husband's really good friends. And Annika just has some really great takes. So
Yes.
we're super excited for this. Annika, do you want to introduce the movie?
Yes, so this is Twilight Eclipse, so the third movie adaptation of the Twilight book saga. So this is number 3 out of technically 5 movies.
Woo!
Woo. It is so weird how like this era of movies, they like, or book to movies, they were making them all like one extra movie. So it doesn't add up.
Yeah, because they have to like stretch it out as much as they can.
Yeah, for sure. And rightfully so, because these were very successful movies.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in
But
the
Eclipse-
time. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And they were like, well, I mean, we'll get into it. But Eclipse specifically is the third movie in the Twilight saga. In this movie, the Cullens make an unlikely alliance with Jacob's wolf pack to take on Victoria and her newborn vampire army who are coming after Bella. Really, though, it's a story of Edward versus Jacob, of who Bella wants to be and who maybe she should be. Bella has to decide if she's really ready to say goodbye to her human life and marry Edward, despite Jacob desperately vying for her love and threatening to give up on her the moment her heart stops beating.
Dun, dun,
Dun,
dun.
I love the tease, like how it's like before her heart stops beating, because like if you read the books, like you know like the transition doesn't happen in Eclipse, but yet like
Mhm.
if you're reading that like not knowing anything, you're like, oh, maybe this is it. You're like, no, not yet, but you're gonna watch the entire movie.
Hold on to your
thinking that.
horses. Okay.
Yeah.
That is so true. This movie is just like, I feel like this movie is a big transition movie. Like it's like setting so much stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
But this movie came out in 2010. And again, we have a third director, David Slade. Same screenwriter, Melissa Rosenberg. I think she's done all 3 movies up to this point. But this movie, I think in particular, had the widest independent release at the time, which I just think means it like hit all the most theaters worldwide.
Yeah. So this was an independent movie. All of them
Okay.
are independent movies. And this one specifically was released in 4,100 theaters, which is kind of unheard of. So,
It's been surpassed though since then, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I think
I'm
I mean
sure.
at the time it was definitely unheard of. I think it took a few years to be surpassed as well. Okay, so before we get into it, Annika, we need to know, are you Team Edward or Team Jacob?
So this is a very loaded question because I feel like when all this was happening, like I read the books, like I was that girl, like in
Yeah,
middle
same.
school.
Oh, we
that
all were.
like,
100%.
everyone
I've read them
wanted
like
to be like,
25 times.
yeah, like everyone wanted to be like, oh no, I'm not into Twilight, but then they're like secretly like reading the books and like so into
Yeah.
it. At the time, I was very much like, I wanted to. So let me put it this way: I'm more like, in my like humble opinion, if it were me, I would rather be a vampire and like date the werewolf. So at the time, I was like very like, yeah, like Team Edward, but I really like Jacob. So like
Yeah.
Team Jacob. So I was very like, depends on the situation, but like I was very much for Edward.
Yeah.
Now that's kind of flipped. I'm very much
Oh,
Team Jacob
interesting.
because in like
Yay.
I think like just reviewing it, I mean, you really see like kind of, and I'm gonna make like a big assumption here. Edward is kind of an abusive boyfriend. Like,
Yeah, especially in this movie too. He's like super controlling.
He plays
super
mind
controlling.
games.
Yeah, manipulative. Like he's always there and always like questioning her and like why did you do that? Like, oh, you went and saw Jacob and now like I'm gonna show up at your house and ask you a million different questions about like
And break your car.
And break your car. Could you imagine if that happened like in real life? Like if someone
Yeah, that was wild.
you were dating like broke your car and was like, you can't leave. Like that's not okay. So retrospect, I guess like now, presently, Team Jacob.
That's what happens when the age gap is too big.
Another Jacob girly. Courtney's on an island all by herself, Team Edward.
Whatever. I thought I had you there for a second, and then you just like totally flipped on me. I was like, what the heck is going on?
Ripped it out from under you.
I'm so sorry. I've always been like Edward, like, because obviously like you look at the story holistically and you're like, I guess he's not that bad. But I don't know. Like, I feel like Jacob was just like, I don't know. He's a better partner and a better person, I feel like. Maybe not a better person. I feel like they're like on the same playing field there, but a better partner. And like, even though Bella technically in the end of everything gets exactly what she wants, I do feel like Jacob could have given her everything without like sacrificing like family and children and anything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's perfect.
That's jumping ahead.
No, that's like exactly what this movie is all about. And we're going to talk so much about it. One thing we've been doing for all the movies is also talking about like the meaning of the title of it being called Eclipse and like what that actually means as well. Have you thought at all about that, Annika?
I really haven't actually. I don't think I ever really understood why. I guess if like I had to guess, it's like moon phases and it's like the darkness or like I don't know. I'm not an astronomer.
I couldn't even tell you like what eclipse is. I'm pretty sure it's like when one thing covers up the other.
Maybe so
it's like
there's multiple kinds of eclipses.
Yeah.
So there's a lunar eclipse where it blocks out the sun, and there's a solar eclipse where the sun blocks out the moon.
Okay.
So while we were in college, actually we had a lunar eclipse. Remember, there's like the pictures of Donald Trump like staring directly into the sun because he didn't need the glasses. So we had a lunar eclipse in our lifetime, which is pretty cool. But for this book and movie specifically, she chose the title Eclipse because this is the point in time where we find out that her affections for Edward are eclipsing her affections for Jacob. So she's gotten to her crossroads and she's chosen one over the other.
It's a metaphor. I love it.
Yeah, it's the same idea. She uses it multiple times throughout the book and the movie. So you've got the Volturi and their power and how they're the true villains eclipsing Victoria's army.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's like multiple times throughout where you have this like eclipse of one thing over another. So that's where the title comes from.
Yeah, it makes so much sense because this is, I mean, we touched on it a bit, but this is like really a pivotal point in the series where like Bella's learning a lot of information and like having to make a lot of decisions. And you said it best, like she's kind of at a crossroads, like she's stuck in this book. And yeah, we'll get into like, I mean, I think it's shown by at the very beginning, she's in the meadow with Edward, right? And then at the very end, she's in the meadow with Edward. And they're talking about the same exact thing, like them getting married. So it's kind of like the same starting and ending point, but like so much stuff happens in between.
A lot of stuff happens. And also well, I mean, she's like, what, 17? So I feel like it's such like a big pivotal moment of like a person's life of like, oh, like which path are you going down? And like there's so much pressure on her. Like I feel like the valedictorian speech, for instance, I know, again, skipping way ahead, but like they were talking about like, oh, this is like the time to go ahead and like make mistakes and like, you know, whatever, because nothing's permanent. And she's sitting there like having like a mini panic attack. Like, Oh,
what
crap.
I want to do is permanent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My thing is actually really permanent. And it's kind of just like that moment of you're so young. Like looking back, I'm like, if I was 17 making that decision, like I mean, I don't know that
It's
I would be
crazy.
comfortable with that. Yeah. Like that's insane.
Yeah.
Me as a 17-year-old I was so like I thought I was mature for
Yeah.
sure, but I was so immature. Like looking back, like your frontal lobe isn't even fully developed. Like how do you make decisions
No.
like that life changing? And even at that time, like I'm just thinking about it in terms of like deciding to marry somebody, but it's
Mhm.
not just that, right? Like she's deciding, do I want to like destroy my soul and become a vampire, which is so much bigger.
Yeah. Like you're giving up so many like potential paths that you might want to take in your life. And she's also, again, like really locking herself down to one person. Because I mean, once you kind of like make that transition, like he's not going to let you go. Like it's not like if something like happens, it's not like you guys can like break up and like just go on your merry ways. Like you're in it. Like that's like, and at 17,
he mentioned it. The divorce rate for humans and vampires is much lower.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a positive.
Yeah, so you mentioned the valedictorian speech. Can we talk about Jess being the valedictorian?
Yeah,
like,
where did that come from?
Well, it doesn't make any sense in my opinion because the first couple movies she's like a ditz, right? Like she's silly, and like then she becomes like the smartest person at the school. No, that's not realistic. She's not the valedictorian in the books.
No, and also I feel like that might have been like an Anna Kendrick situation.
Yes.
Like this was like off screen. Like she started kind of getting big. This was still before Pitch Perfect, but she was picking up different projects. So she probably, I wonder if it, and this is like a big assumption, and again, it has nothing to do with the movie itself, but maybe it was like salary negotiations. Like, hey, I need to get paid more because I'm doing well, or like I'm better. And so they're like, okay, well, we have to give you more lines if we're going to pay you more, and we have to give you more of a part. So therefore she became the valedictorian, like by default.
Yeah.
Like that's my
assumption. Talked about it. Yeah, we talked about it a little bit in New Moon, where they, and when I say they, I'm talking about like the directors, the filmmakers, like everyone behind the scenes. They kind of started to realize what they had with Anna Kendrick because she was playing like a very small role in the first two movies. And I think they kind of figured out what they had because they gave her so much more. Like they started to give her more. And in New Moon, a lot of her lines were improv. Like they wanted her to be a part of it, but she wasn't really written in. So that may also be why she ended up with the valedictorian spot, because they wanted to showcase, like, we know what we have here. And she did a great job in that scene.
Yeah.
She was perfect.
It was very believable.
Yeah, I believed it. I mean, and rightfully so. Like, I feel like they saw her talent because, I mean, Anna Kendrick is super talented. So they saw that. They're like, oh, we should probably use this. Like, I also
get our money's worth.
Yeah, exactly. I also feel like Kristen Stewart also, and this is going to be very bold as well, I feel like they got like an acting coach or something, because between Twilight and then New Moon, and then like New Moon to Eclipse, it was a massive jump of like skill. She wasn't as like jumpy.
She was cast in multiple movies after Twilight came out. So she was in, and I forget what it's called, but it's the Joan Jett movie.
Yeah.
And that one was huge for her career. And I think it was a confidence thing, honestly. Like, I think a lot of it had to do with confidence.
Yeah, you can tell. Like, there was a lot of confidence. She also had like freckles, so I don't know if that helped too. Like, I never noticed the freckles like in the other movies, and all of a sudden she had freckles. So that might.
I think it's called The Runaways.
Is that The Runaways? Yeah.
But Annika, to your point, like the whole speech with Anna Kendrick, like it was just so effective in highlighting, like, hey, Bella's like making a big decision here, and it was like a great way to give Anna Kendrick. I mean, she executed the speech perfectly, but it really transitioned the movie. But before we get into like all of that, so let's take a step back. this movie in general just has like a lot more action, like from beginning to end than any of the movies so far. And the movie actually starts out like the first thing you see is Riley getting turned into a vampire.
Yep.
And so I think that sets the precedent for like how this movie is going to go. Also, you see Victoria. I actually don't know if you see her in the very beginning of this movie, but when we see her, she is a new actress. So they recast Victoria in this movie with Bryce Dallas Howard, who I think is a much more significant actress. She's in like the new Jurassic World movies, but she's in some other stuff too.
Yeah, she's in a lot. Like she's really like blown up like in popularity in the last few years for sure.
So both of the actresses, I'm gonna be honest, I've never heard of either of them. But so Rachel Lefevre, whatever.
I think she's more random.
Yeah, she was. So I think Twilight kind of had like a lower budget, probably. And so they focused their casting on the main two characters, and everyone else they kind of did their best. And I think Rachel, whatever her last name is, I think she did a great job. The reason she wasn't recast because of anything, because of her skills or because they wanted somebody else, what happened was she accidentally double booked herself.
Could you imagine?
And yeah, she booked.
You accidentally double book yourself for Twilight? What?
Yep.
If you would make that a priority, I feel like this is your movie. This is where you shine.
Yeah,
That's
so
crazy.
she tried, right? So she took it was a 10-day engagement for another movie. And what happened was when they announced that they were going to start filming Eclipse, she had already committed to this 10-day thing. And when she started talking with the filmmakers about like trying to make it work, they pretty much just said, no, thank you. We'll cancel your contract and go with someone else.
Yikes.
So,
I feel like though, and what was that movie? Like, can anyone name that movie?
Literally, I don't know. Exactly. Literally couldn't tell you.
I feel like she's been like, yeah, let's go with Eclipse, Twilight. Like that's a name, that's a franchise. Like I'm gonna get recognized in that, but we can't sit here and say like, oh yeah, she was in that one movie. I'm so glad she chose that instead of Twilight.
Well, and this one, Eclipse, is Victoria's movie. Like, this is her movie. She's in it. She keeps coming back up in it the whole time.
She's a main character in this movie.
It's like her heartbreak moment. And like I don't know, I feel like, again, Bryce Dallas Howard did a phenomenal job, but it was kind of like, oh, that's Bryce Dallas Howard. Like, of course, now looking back on it, like watching it now, I'm like, wow, that's so cool. And you kind of get taken out of the emotion of all of it because you're like, hey, like, is that a different actress than before? So that was a poor decision on their part, or rather her part, but
her part.
You know, we all take our paths in life. Just like Bella did.
Yeah.
Okay, so kind of shifting gears, how do we feel about all of Bella's narrating throughout the movie? I feel like this movie more so than, like, I know there's narrating in Twilight and Eclipse.
New Moon.
A New Moon. New Moon, it's a little bit different because she's like writing to Alice, but in this one, it's like straight up narrating. And I mean, I'll let y'all give your thoughts first.
I mean, I really didn't like notice it. I feel like I think that was just like, and that might have been me because I was just like, I don't know, I didn't notice that it was her like narrating, so to speak. I mean, like you heard her talking, but I felt like it was a very like natural way to kind of help the story move along. But I mean, personal opinion.
Yeah. I actually really enjoyed it, and I made notes about it, about her narrating and how like I started listening to what she was saying, and I was like, Kristen Stewart did a great job with this narrating, because it sounds like inner monologue. Like it doesn't sound rehearsed. It doesn't sound like forced in any way. I actually thought she did a really good job. I'm glad you brought it up, Court.
Yeah, I think she did a good job with it too. However, I found it very distracting. Like whenever she was
Says
narrating.
the girl who watches movies with the captions on them.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't watch this one with the captions because I know every line that's gonna happen, but I did find it distracting. I don't know why. I think maybe because like it in this movie in particular to me, it felt like a cop out for actually like explaining what was going on. I didn't feel like it was like truly Bella's inner monologue in the sense of like she did a good job executing the lines, but like it was more like her trying to explain what was happening with the tribes and with Edward and everything versus like in past movies it's been more of like how she's feeling and like what's going on in her head, and I appreciate that more as her inner monologue than just like trying to explain what's happening in the story, which I felt like that was how it was used in this movie in particular.
And I may be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure all of the narrations are lines from the books.
Yeah, I think they
And
are.
Yeah.
I think Stephanie Myers had a lot to do with that. So Stephanie Myers was actually on set for all of the movies. She was
Rightfully
there
so.
every time that they were recording or filming, I guess. And the reason why she was there is to make sure that they got the character backstories correct and to make sure that if they
Okay.
had questions of like how would Edward handle this situation or how would Jess do this or how would Victoria have acted this way, because she has all of that. Like
Mhm.
she created these characters, so she's the expert, right? But she also would sway direction. So I think she probably had a part in that. I will say too, so David Slade is known for like action slasher type movies, and
Mhm.
that's the way that those types of movies are done. Instead of like acting everything out, a lot of times they will have narrations. And
Yeah.
so I think some of that comes from the way that the director was, the way that he does movies.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it does like tie it back to the book, like kind of tell the story, but I did find it distracting. I can't help it. Okay. So, we're going to move on from the narrating.
Yeah.
This movie is like packed with information. It's like the fifth Harry Potter book. Like there's just like a lot of stuff going on. And um it's all about backstories. So the first one that we learn about is one of the most interesting to me, but it's when Bella goes to the tribe,
Mhm.
the Quileutes, I can't say it, but the tribe backstory, and she learns like the story of like how they all became wolves because they have like magic in their blood.
Yeah.
And we hear the story of Taha Aki's wife sacrificing herself to save the whole tribe.
Did you know that originally they had Kristen Stewart play the wife in that
Nuh-uh.
flashback?
That would have been so cool. That would have been so
Well,
cool.
so when they played it for test audiences, apparently the audience felt like it was like too dramatic and it was actually like comedic versus having that like it's supposed to be very serious.
I could
Yeah.
see that.
And so
Yeah.
so they were like, not doing that.
Well, I totally get that because they do that a lot throughout this movie because it kind of
Mhm.
integrates like Bella's real world versus her dream world because they kind of
Mhm.
like integrate, and like and we'll get into it too with like the Jasper one, but she mixes like characters in her head, and
Mhm.
it definitely like there's times in these series where it does make me laugh when they do that. So it probably was better that they removed that.
Yeah.
I think I'd also get confused again, like taking myself out of the books and like being like someone that read the books. Again, like this was probably like
Mhm.
at least 10 years ago that I read the books.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But I feel like taking yourself out of the books, not having read the books, and you're just jumping into the movies. If you saw Kristen Bell as the wife in that, you'd be like, wait, did
Stewart.
I miss something in the books? Like,
Yeah.
you know how like some movies do the whole thing where actually here's a great example because I am a big Vampire Diaries fan.
Okay.
Oh.
And I kind of kept like getting like the werewolf rules kind of mixed up because there's werewolves in that and then there's werewolves in this obviously.
Yeah.
And in Vampire Diaries, there's like one of the main characters, Elena, she's a doppelganger of like this vampire, Catherine. So in all like the flashbacks that they have where Catherine is there, it's Elena, the same actress. And her name, like the actress's name escapes me at the moment. But they like that makes
Nina Dobrev.
Yes. And so like that makes sense. Like you're seeing those flashbacks and you're like, okay, that's Catherine, not Elena. I see why they're doing that because of the story that's happening and the history that's there. I feel like had they done that in Eclipse where Kristen Bell was standing in, people would be like, oh, wait, are they related? Is like that why, like, is that why Jacob's like so enthralled with her, is like because and enamored or whatever, because it's like she's technically part werewolf, or like she has the werewolf blood in her. Like what's going on there? It would just blur the line.
You keep saying Kristen Bell on accident.
Oh my god, I do.
And I'm sitting here imagining Kristen Bell as Bella's role. Could you imagine? Like they put like a brown wig on her. It would be the funniest shit I've ever seen.
Oh my god.
It's like that when they did the like the parody of the Twilight series, the movie.
Yes.
It's like then you just have like, instead of Kristen Stewart, you have Kristen Bell, and
oh my god,
I'm sure she would sign on for in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Who wouldn't? Oh
so yes, Kristen Stewart, if she was in that rather than the actual wife, it would get very confusing.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so we also learned about the wolves, what imprinting is. And
I thought that was so sweet. That whole conversation.
I know. And Jacob explains to Bella what it is and like how he's kind of felt. He's been in Sam's head, so he kind of knows what it feels like. And she asks him like in the most awkward fashion.
You can see the panic on her face when she asks him.
Yeah. She's like, have you ever imprinted before? What a weird way
Do I need to be concerned?
But then when he says no, then it feels like she just got like gut punched. Like she's kind of like hoping, like he was like, yeah, Bella, I have. And
it's you.
And it's you.
It's always been you.
Exactly. I think she was expecting that. Like she was expecting like, because she is the drama. So she was expecting like, drama. Like, oh, so I need to go with you because you've imprinted on me. I'm like, you know, we're tied together, but instead.
Or maybe I can have both if I explain to Edward that Jacob's imprinted on me.
What?
You know, yeah, that's so funny. But it is interesting, like, kind of learning about the Sam, Leah, Emily love triangle a little bit, and like how hard that is for Leah. And they don't spend like quite as much time on Leah in this movie as they do like in the book, but she's actually like a really interesting character because Jacob, like, you know, feels some sort of like, I don't know, like kinship to her because she's Harry Clearwater's daughter, and but she's also like annoying and depressed all the time. So she's, yeah.
I think that Jacob feels more responsibility for a lot of the pack members because he is the rightful alpha. Like he's the one who's supposed to be leading them. Not that he would like want to take anything away from someone, or it means that he like doesn't care about people, but I think that does play into it. And the way he cares about them kind of shows you that maybe he should be in charge.
Yeah, because Sam's very harsh, like very, like, I don't care, I make the rules.
Matter of fact.
Yeah, like this is the line, I have drawn it.
Like older brother vibes.
Yeah, exactly. And Jacob's more like, okay, well, I see.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's like be very like level-headed about everything. I will say though, like I feel like if Stephenie Meyer and like the entire Twilight people, the Twilight Saga people, I just want to do another movie. I would love to see like a Leah, Sam, Emily love triangle. Like,
that would be interesting.
So much in the books, like about like the intensity. So you see it in Eclipse, but you're like, you don't really like get it. You see it in the movies, but you don't really like feel like as passionate about it, and you don't really understand it as much as you do in the book. So I would love to see that play out.
There's so much about the wolves that they like really kind of just gloss over, that you don't truly understand from just watching the movies. And it's kind of a shame, but it would be really difficult to portray a lot of the wolf stuff like in the movies, because they have to be like naked in the woods stuff like that.
And these are long movies already. Like,
yeah, they are long. They are long. Okay, so we also get to hear Rosalie's backstory, which I think is so well done. I love how theatrical she is. But it gives you a lot of perspective. Again, like all of this stuff is just like setting up, like teeing up for Breaking Dawn, but really gives you a lot of perspective into why Rosalie is envious of Bella.
And it makes
why
a
she's
lot
mean
of
to her all the time.
Yeah, and like you kind of you're like, okay, yeah, I see it now. Rosalie has always been one of my favorite characters in the Twilight Saga, and that's like kind of specifically why, is because she's like, I had a perfect life. I loved my life. I wouldn't have traded it for anything. And the fact that Bella's sitting here being like, oh, I'm ready to give up everything. Like I don't care about my choices as a human. Like I would give up my humanity and all of that. And she's like, you don't understand how precious all of that is, because that's all I ever wanted. And you're just like, Rosalie values all of that so much more than Bella clearly does. And it's just really sad to see kind of like that dynamic play out, but it kind of, it humanizes Rosalie a little bit more, because up to this point you're like, wow, like she's got some issues, and she does, and it's like, okay, softens her a little bit.
I get it now.
You get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the classic you don't know what you got till it's gone conversation that every rom-com has.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I also love at the end of this scene when she like does the whole story, and like she goes through the theatrics of her, you know, chasing down
getting back
her
at them.
fiance. Like that's amazing.
Dressed as the bride coming to kill him. I
love it.
Yes,
I love
crazy. But then Bella's like, I get it, and she's like, there's only one thing like I'd want in this world, and that's Edward. And then Rosalie is like,
you're wrong.
When your turn, like there's gonna be one thing that you're gonna want more. And then like the music cuts off and she says blood, and
so like dramatic.
It was so dramatic. Like that's probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie. It was like, whoa, drama.
But it's true. And then again, we're talking about 17-year-old Bella, and you think back like, when you're 17 years old, and like what's something you really, really wanted, and you're like, I have to have this. This is the only thing I ever wanted. Blah, blah, blah. Like nothing can change my mind. And that's kind of like her mindset now, being like, oh, I just want Edward. It's like, okay, well, sis, if you just like sit on it for a little bit, and I will like talk to Edward to saying like, no, like are you sure? Like I want you to
take time.
Yeah, take time. Like I want you to have the opportunity to weigh all your options. I do give him props for that, but Bella just being like, yeah, that's it. Like, I want that. It's like, okay, but again, sit on it,
think about it,
digest it,
give
it some time, because it might not be what you want. Obviously, like it turns in, it's okay, but
along those lines, I made a note that throughout the movie, Edward kind of jokingly, but you know he's serious, keeps asking her, like, well, then marry me. Well, then marry me. And she keeps saying no. Like, he's like, well, then we just get married. And she's like, nah, like, no. But he just keeps on and keeps on. And you're like, dang, like, how persistent is this man?
And how many times do you have to say, like, I feel like the fact that she said no, she's like, no, I don't want to marry you. Or like, not right now. And then, like you said, like, he just was like very persistent. Like, oh, like, will you marry me? Marry me, marry me. She's like, no, no. At some point too, you have to be like, and then after they get in, I know this is like kind of all over the place, But after they get engaged, then she goes and like knacks on Jacob. And you're like,
I
wait,
love that. That's my favorite scene.
Oh my God, wait, we're going to get into it. Don't get into it yet. We have some more stuff to cover. Okay, so while we're on the line of backstories, we have to talk about Jasper's backstory.
I hate I hate Jasper's. Okay, he went from normal person to now I have this thick Southern accent
Yes.
that is very fake.
Where did
And
that come
I was a
from?
Confederate soldier? What? Like, that came out of nowhere. Like,
The accent kills me because you're like, wait, I know he
so
only had
mean.
like 4 lines the entire saga leading up to this point, but never once did he have a thick Southern accent until
Never.
he's like, well, actually, I was a Confederate soldier. And you're like, great, let's
Talks
carry
out the
that.
side of his mouth. Like,
Yeah.
so bad.
He's like, let me
What
show
does he
you
say
my
to
stuff.
Alice? He's like, hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
But we get to hear his backstory, which I think, like, in the book, the backstory is so interesting because he talks about like all the vampire wars of the South, and they kind of like don't do it a lot of justice in the movies. But what I do think they effectively do in the movies is show the parallel between Maria and Jasper, and then Victoria and Riley. Like, I think that is very well done, and I've never really noticed it as much as I did in this rewatch, because I think I've always just been like focused on how much I thought they botched the Jasper backstory thing.
I do like the parallel there. I like at first, like when we go back to the beginning scene, like I remember thinking like, why do we care about this? Like why? Like I feel like the opening scene of Riley, like of that, I feel like we could have done without. Like I understand that we were setting it up for everything else, but as far as those parallels of like creating the newborns and all of that, I think that was really well done, and that director who did the whole like he's known for like scary horrors, like gory things. I think that's where he really like shined. Here. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll bring it up later. We can continue.
Oh, okay. The anticipation is killing me. So we'll move on from Jasper, because I feel like we've kind of established his Southern accent is horrible and that whole thing is kind of whack. But really what this movie is about, and we've talked about it a lot, is Jacob versus Edward, and Bella kind of having to decide like what is important to her and what does she want to do. And just throughout the movie, there's just so much like just brought up over and over again. And Liz, you already brought up one of the things I wanted to talk about, but like Edward constantly asking Bella, like, do you want to get married? And them debating like the concept of marriage. One other thing I think is really funny is just like Charlie hating Edward like throughout the whole movie. Like it's so comical.
The unsung hero is Charlie. Like he's
just
perfection.
He's so consistent throughout all of the movies. Like, he's just so great. He doesn't get enough credit.
Yeah. So there's 2 moments with Charlie that I like love. So one is when Bella gets back like really late from hanging out with Jake, and he's like, Edward can't even like so much as like let you come back on time or like come back for dinner or whatever. And she's like, oh, well, like actually I was hanging out with Jake. And he's like, okay, like that's fine.
Cool.
Enjoy.
Have a great night.
You want to go back?
And then the other one is when Charlie tries to give Bella the like birds and the bees talk.
Oh God.
Yeah, and she has to be like, Dad, I'm a virgin. And
I like where she's like, Mom beat it to you like 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think it all works the same. But he's like, virgin, liking Edward a little bit more now.
I liked in that scene when now I'm like losing it. what did he say? Oh, he was like, I'm just as embarrassed as you are. And she's like, I highly doubt that.
That was so relatable. So relatable. Because my mom like always used to try to like, I don't think she was doing it on purpose, but I always felt like she was trying to make me feel embarrassed whenever she would like bring up the sex talks with me when I was in high school. And I was like, why are you doing this to me? Like
Stop.
I thought
have
we were
the
supposed to be like
internet.
sex positive. Like, don't make me feel ashamed and embarrassed. But I don't think parents do it on purpose. I think it's just like when you're a kid, like you just feel that way inherently. And you can't help it. It's like magnified times like 100.
Mhm.
Okay, so then we have Jacob. And Jacob is just like hating the whole movie, the idea of Bella turning into a vampire. And he goes from like basically saying what I said at the beginning, which is like the moment your heart starts beating, like it's over. And then by the end, he's kind of like, okay, maybe I can deal with this. But also throughout, he's like constantly goading Edward, which I just think is like so fun because he's like so immature.
I want to talk about the fact that Taylor Lautner is at his peak attractiveness in this movie.
Yes.
He's wet. He's shirtless.
The whole movie.
He's carrying her around the whole time.
Yes.
This man is just like, you're literally looking at Bella and you're like, take the bait. Take it. He is literally perfect. He can do everything. He's an actual guard dog. Like, what more do you need? Like, you know your babies would be beautiful. What are you doing?
You can have
like,
kids,
come
you can
on.
have the grandchildren, you can still like be with your parents and like still grow old and have everything you actually want. Because like in the back of her mind, she's like, oh, I kind of like, I want all this stuff. Jacob can give that to you. And I mean, let's compare not even apples to apples. Like that's completely different because like Jacob, like you said, amazing, like peak form for him, for Taylor Lautner. And then you kind of look at Edward, you're like,
Robert Pattinson's over there like,
yeah. I want to know, like he is shirtless the entire movie. Yeah. I feel like all he like the whole movie, all he's wearing, and I mean it's accurate to the books. Like he's just wearing like his cut off jeans because like they don't talk about it in the movies, but in the books it's like a really big deal that they're like running out of clothes. And shoes constantly because they keep like
shit apart all the time.
Wolves and destroying them, and so they're just like wearing like all these janky jeans that they get from like the Goodwill and like cutting them off, and they're like, this is good enough.
Yeah. So the directors actually, this was like intentional. I know it's like part of the book.
Yeah.
But they got some negative feedback after New Moon came out that the wolf parts were too serious. And everything surrounding Jacob was too serious. And so they were like, you know what? We got to start poking some fun at Jacob and the wolf pack. And a running joke was like, oh, the wolves don't know how to wear clothes. They're always naked. And
because they're destroying
rightfully
all their clothes.
so. So the directors were like, all right, like let's make this funny. Jacob's not going to wear a shirt the entire movie. He does not one time put a shirt on. And they like crack jokes about it the whole time. Like Edward says something about like, can you put a shirt on?
Yeah,
and,
he does.
Like, Bella like touches him and like all like the whole time they're poking fun at it because they're trying to like lighten the mood of the wolf pack. So that's why.
Also, him carrying her, like he makes it look very effortless, and I like that. But I was kind of thinking like the whole time, like, is he actually carrying her? Like,
yeah, he is actually carrying her. And so they originally were going to have her like on this trolley system and him kind of like running behind her, and they were going to like CGI it so it looks like he was carrying her, but it didn't look real for obvious reasons. Yeah. And so they're like, all right, we're going to have him actually carry her. And like we know, when they're filming movies, they could take hours to do a scene just over and over and over again. So all those scenes where he's carrying her, they had to shoot them all in one day so that Taylor Lautner could take time afterwards to like recuperate, because it was so like physically intense for him to be carrying around a full-grown woman all day long.
Yeah. And he made it look effortless.
He did such a good job.
You know,
I
And
would
his
want
like
her job though. Like, who just
traps
gets
and
to be, like-
everything.
Yeah.
Like the whole time I was like, oh, okay.
you know what doesn't look realistic in these movies is when the
What?
vampires jump and like attack something, and they like kind of like the way that they kind of like swoop down. I'm like, why can't they just like, you know, use the laws of physics and just
They're
like
supposed to
go
be like
faster?
bats.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not really how it's supposed to be, I don't think. Like, they don't fly. They just like jump further
They
and
glide.
faster.
They're very
No.
graceful.
But they're not supposed to glide. Like, that's not how it's like described in the books.
They could have sharpened that up just like slightly.
I agree.
Like make it look a little more real. I mean, like Taylor Lautner's literally carrying, like you said, carrying somebody, and like good for Kristen Stewart, because like, she's getting held all day. Like she didn't have to touch the ground at all. But like Taylor Lautner's putting in all the work. Like at least like the vampires could have done is like learn how to like jump, you know, or like stiffen up while they were jumping. So they're not being like just gliding like Peter Pan.
Yeah, they shouldn't be gliding. That's so wrong.
I like it.
Okay. And then last thing about the about Jacob and thinking about Bella is when the Wolf Boys like make the jokes about knowing his inner monologue, you know? And they're like, oh, is Bella gonna call? Like, should I call Bella? Like, should I call Bella and hang up? Like
that was really
typical high school stuff.
Yeah. Love it.
I love that they all like kind of like joked on him like that. At first it felt a little like fratty, like it was like a little frat house with like all these guys and like coming out and they're like cutoffs and like no shirt, being like, haha, Jacob, Bella, haha, like poking fun. But I think it did like add that playfulness and then added that whole fact of like, yes, they're in each other's heads, like they know what's going on, so of course they're gonna be like, especially like
picking
in, like,
on each other.
Yeah, picking on each other, and then like in that brotherly sense, because they all are brothers without like actually being like blood brothers, but they have that one thing in common. So I thought that was like that was a really playful and like cute way to be like, they're connected, and very real too, I feel like.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about the kisses. Very iconic parts of these movies. And we're going to talk about Jacob, but we're also going to talk about Bella and Edward. But we'll start with Jacob. So Jacob gets 2 kisses in this movie. So number 1 is he unexpectedly kisses Bella and Bella punches him in the face.
And breaks her hand. Well, sprains it, but breaks her hand.
That was so funny. Like when they went back to Charlie and it's like Jacob, Edward, and then like Charlie,
like, what happened?
What's going on? And she's like, Jake kissed me and then I punched him in the face.
You know Charlie's secretly
Charlie's like,
heck yeah. All right. Good job.
He's like kind of like, good job, Jake. But he's kind of like, wait, I don't know what I'm supposed to do in this moment.
But also good job, Bella, like for like standing up for yourself and hurting yourself, like punching him in the face.
She broke her hand punching my face. I
That's
want to know how many takes it took them to get that scene just right, because you know they were laughing. You know that everyone, especially Charlie's face where he's like,
oh,
and then he like looks this way and you're just like, how did any of them keep a straight face? I wouldn't have been able to.
That was a pretty funny scene, I will agree. And then we've got what I would say is like really the iconic kiss number 2, where Bella asks Jacob to kiss her to like save him from doing something stupid. And this kiss, I don't know about y'all, but I remember, like I knew this kiss was coming because I've read the books a million times, but I very, very vividly, like when I was rewatching this, I remembered like the first time I ever watched that kiss, like on the big screen in the theaters, and just being like, oh,
magical.
Oh my God. Like,
wow.
What an amazing feat of cinema right there.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Also, that's my favorite scene Like everything surrounding that scene, like the dialogue from the night before, everything leading up to that moment, like you know it's coming, the anticipation, the scenery, everything that happens afterwards as well is just like perfect. Everyone does what they're supposed to do. Edward is forgiving Bella. Jacob understands what the kiss was, but also gives him hope. Like everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing and what the way they should have been acting the whole time up into that moment. And I just love everything about it.
It was very symbolic. Do we have like a kiss count though? Like versus like how many times Jacob and Bella kissed versus how many times Edward and Bella kissed throughout the whole movie?
So Jacob and Bella have 2.
Yeah. And we know that. So there's the kiss there's a lot more kisses with Edward
and Bella kiss like every time. This is the first time we see Bella and Jacob kiss. There's a couple times where they got close in New Moon, but they were always interrupted by something. But this is the first, like these are the first like real intimate moments that they have.
Right.
The only thing that bothers me about the second one is the part they cut out from the book was explaining what that meant to Bella. Like Kristen Stewart, you can kind of see it on her face, what just happened. But they cut out the whole part where Bella sees her future with Jacob and what she could have if she chooses him. And they actually had a scene where like during that kiss, Bella sees all of that and she sees them like doing everything together, getting married, having kids, growing old, and like what that would have all looked like. And for some reason, they didn't keep it in the movie, and that was a little bit disappointing for me.
I think it would have been cheesy, though.
I think it would have worked so well. Because if you don't know the books, like watching that, you don't know what Bella's going through. And they don't really talk about it at all.
They do a little bit. They give Jacob the dialogue.
Well, but the only part is where she comes back and she's like, I don't know what happened. And Edward says, like, you love him. And she's like, but I love you more. But that's the only part you get. And then they just like move on from it.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. I mean, they do. It's not in this part of the movie, but Jacob kind of explains like, you could have like a real life with me. Like I would be warm. Like we could grow old together. We could have kids. And so like, I think from a movie perspective, like you kind of get that like with
it's understood.
Yeah.
I would have loved to see it.
I don't know. I feel like if we saw it, it would have been like in the Twilight movie when Alice shows Arrow the vision of like Edward and Bella like running together as
I thought that
vampires.
Was amazing. I loved it.
Oh God. Okay. But yeah. Okay. So we also get, we have lots of Jacob, but there is a lot of Edward and Bella. Mm-hmm. And what we actually start to talk about with Edward and Bella is sex and the fact that they don't have it. And Bella
haven't had it.
Haven't. Yeah.
Yeah. And Bella tries to seduce Edward. First of all, he gets her a bed, which is fucking hilarious.
I was so uncomfortable.
It's really
throughout
cringy.
That entire scene. I knew it was coming and I was still uncomfortable about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell y'all exactly what I wrote. Okay. So I've got in my notes, I've got the sex talk moment. And then the next thing, when they have the house to themselves and Bella tries to jump old Ed's bones. That is literally what she's doing. She is there for it, and she's like, he has to give me this because this is what I'm requesting. And he's like,
no.
Stop taking your clothes off. And she's like, you want to do that part? And you're like, bleh.
She was so rejected though.
Stop.
I would just laughed. Like if someone was like, actually, no, like keep your clothes. I was like, what? Well, I'll just see myself out then. Like that.
Yeah.
It also wasn't really like the forefront of her mind until Charlie said something. So I think that's like a note for all parents. Like maybe you should just like hold on. until they bring up the question.
Don't bring it up.
Because she was like, well, I am going to like, give up my literal entire life for him. So
he could give me this one thing.
Yeah. This
want to see
one thing.
What I'm getting with this agreement here.
And she's not wrong for
that. I was having flashbacks to Legally Blonde where Elle, the big guy, I forget what his name is, she sees him like trying to ask one of these two girls out, and they're like, why would we ever be interested in you? And she like walks back and she's like, how could you give me the most beautiful night of my life and then take it all away? And I was like, this is what's happening. This is happening right now.
Yeah, but despite all of that, somehow Bella says yes to marriage in that scene also.
It's very sweet. It is very sweet.
Yeah, it's sweet. It's the ring is interesting.
Tell me.
I just feel like you go ahead, Courtney.
No, you go.
I feel like, and this goes back to like earlier, like he's asking her, and she keeps saying like no, 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 and then it's kind of like she presents something that's like, well, I really want this, and he's like, well, guess what I want? Like, if you marry me. It's like, okay, like, I guess. Like,
he does give a good, like, argument, though. Because he's like, we're doing everything else wrong. Like, we could do this one thing right.
Okay, look. All I'm going to say is you're telling me this man is 109 years old and he's never banged. Ever.
No, he's not worried about himself. He's worried about her. The whole time he talks about how he's... Yeah.
1,000.
If I was Bella, that he does that in New Moon when he leaves her. It is implied. We talked about this, Courtney.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
You're not going 109 years with that.
Well, no, there's no way.
Okay, but that's such a double standard. If I was Bella, I would be like,
it's not a standard
until marriage.
It's not a standard. He's not saying that there's anything wrong with her. He's like, I want to protect like every part of your soul possible, especially if I'm taking it away. That's what he's saying.
That's for her to decide. Like, I mean,
it is, but she agrees to it. So
if he's out there on the streets, that's like literally the most age-old
out
double
there
standard.
On the streets.
That's the most age-old double standard that exists, though. Like all the way back from whatever year Edward was born, that men can just go like be on the prowl and like fuck around, and then the women have to be pure and wait till marriage. Like,
well, he thinks it's not about her being pure for him. Okay, he also already thinks that his self is damned. He is damned already, but if he can save Bella, he wants to, especially because he thinks at this point in time, he still thinks that there's a chance that she won't make him change her.
You're ruining the story for me because I've always imagined him as a virgin up until this point.
Courtney,
there's no way.
So naive. So naive.
I was like 11 years old when I read the book.
How old are you now?
I haven't read the books in a while. The movies are fake. They're not the same.
Oh my God. You need to go reread New Moon because it is definitely implied.
Yeah, I feel like too. I mean, you're just not roaming the earth for at least 109 years and not getting some.
And looking like that? Absolutely not.
No. Okay. We're moving on because this is giving me anxiety. So the Volturi is involved in this movie, which I think is interesting. And, it's kind of shown, it's not even implied, it's shown that they know what's going on with the newborn army in Seattle, but they're kind of just like letting it happen because they want maybe the Cullens to get destroyed. And we haven't even talked about the newborn army really at all. But there's a lot of scenes with the newborn army too, and them like all killing each other, which I think is weird.
I think they're like rather uninteresting. Like as far as everything else goes, they're kind of just like a means to an end, and like you get the backstory behind them because it's supposed to like be this build up into the big fight scene, which the fight scene's very cool. But the newborn vampires were just kind of like, okay, like we've already seen it. Like let's move on. Yeah.
Isn't there a book that Stephenie Meyer wrote? Oh yeah,
The
about
Short
Bree
Second
Tanner. Life of Bree Tanner. And I feel like was that out when this movie came out? 2007.
I don't think so. Maybe it was.
Wait, no. This Eclipse came out in 2007, but this movie came out in 2010. Or this book came out in 2010, which is when the movie came out too.
So they probably just missed each other.
So the movie came out in like June 24th, 2010. So they were kind of like the same time. So it's weird to me though, because it feels like they incorporated, maybe it's the backwards, like maybe because there was so much need for it in the movies that Stephenie Meyer was like, oh, like let me write, she's creating it all in her head and providing it to the directors. And so she made the book because of it.
I think that they created intrigue around Bree Tanner so that the book would be successful.
Yeah, it worked. I was intrigued by her.
She's otherwise uninteresting.
Yeah, but I kind of agree with you though. I don't think like all of that adds a ton. Like I could have done without a lot of the like newborn scenes. Okay, let's see if there's any.
Let's talk about the battle scene.
Yeah, I think that's really the only scene.
There's two battle scenes that are important.
There's 2 battle scenes. There's also the like before we get to the battle scene, like just the fact that the vampires and the werewolves like team up, like kind of go against the treaty, and they like end up working together, and they have some like newborn killing practice sessions too, which I think are funny, and I love Emmett in those scenes.
The little training like montage of them, like all of them, like that was really cute. That was fun. That was like a little like treat.
Yeah, so, I agree.
Keelan Lutz actually injured Jackson Rathbone when they were filming these, and Jackson Rathbone got a concussion, had to go to the hospital.
All I was thinking about during these scenes was because last movie I learned that Jackson Rathbone does method acting. So the whole time I was just thinking about him being like in method acting, and I was like distracted. I was like, this man is crazy. Do you think he was like walking around with his like Southern accent? Like,
I guarantee
Maria? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, so the fight scene. There are 2 fight scenes. There's the scene on the top of the mountain, and then there's the scene at the bottom of the mountain.
Equally as important, in my opinion.
Equally as important. So I guess we can start with what's going on at the bottom of the mountain. So the newborns all come in, and like basically the Cullen clan and the wolves like are going after the newborns.
When the wolves come in, that is like the badass moment of the entire saga. The whole series, like that is the coolest moment right then. They did such a good job with it.
Totally agree. I think that scene is really, really well done. I was really impressed with like how kind of realistic it looked too. Like I didn't think it looked cheesy or silly. Like I thought that was like pretty well done. And then also what I think is interesting about this scene is all the special effects with the vampires. So like the way that their faces like break apart, the way you see like Emmett's like forehead kind of break apart, and then also like the sounds of like glass cracking. I think that's all like very effective.
Yep.
Okay. So then we have the scene on top of the mountain. And with that scene, a lot goes down. So Seth is up there. Seth. We love Seth.
Cutie.
And then Riley and Victoria show up. And this scene is so interesting to me because, like, I feel like you see a side of Edward that you haven't really seen up until this point. But it's really, like, him, one, talking to Seth and kind of saying, like, don't trust her, like, playing mind games, kind of. And then also playing mind games with Victoria and goading her to come back and fight him, which
he wanted to be done with her.
Yeah.
Like, he wanted it to be done.
Yeah, no, I agree. But it's weird because it goes against everything that he's sort of done up until this point, because he's very much like just protecting Bella. And at this point, he goes against it a little bit in the sense that he brings Victoria back. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved the whole scene that they did. I thought it was very believable. The whole thing, Victoria's actress, I forget her name, did a wild
Bryce
job.
Dallas Howard.
Yeah, she was great. I do have like a little tidbit of a fact. So
Okay.
Fun.
Robert Pattinson said that they had a hard time filming the Edward Victoria fight scene because Bryce Dallas Howard is so like such a gentle person and she's so nice. And she said that she was scared to hurt Robert Pattinson. She was scared to be the one that hurts Edward because she was worried that the Twilight fans would come after her.
That's so funny.
I could see that though. That makes sense because Twilight fans at that time were very intense.
Yeah.
One thing I do think worth mentioning though is I feel like the set in this scene, like I didn't like it. Like
Why?
with all the snow and like Bella not wearing a jacket the whole time.
That was
kind
like
of weird.
That was so like such a moment of like, okay, so we're gonna like keep her up in the top of the mountains where it's snowing and it's cold, but we're not gonna like bring a parka for her or like anything
like so much so that she has to share a sleeping bag with Jacob, and then she just like walks out the next day after that whole dramatic scene and is just like wearing a shirt.
Like she was like in a plaid like flannel and like jeans. Like that's it. Like that's what she wore to sleep on top of the mountain. It's like you didn't bring anything else. Like they should have like thought about that. Or like she could have. I mean, I know Edward like, oh, like the elements don't faze me. But someone could have been like, hey, like she needs a jacket, or Kristen or Bella should have been like, hey, like I need something else.
Who's got a coat?
Yeah, anybody?
Well, I think it made it look unrealistic because obviously like it wasn't filmed at the top of the mountain, right? It's a set. And I think that gave it away that she wasn't like dressed appropriately. But Bella does do something really bold in this scene, and it's a tie back to Taha Aki's wife sacrificing herself, and she cuts herself to distract Victoria and Seth. And I liked that.
Not Seth,
well done.
Yeah.
Riley, sorry.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of my favorite scenes, if not my favorite scene, because it really does like tie back to the beginning of the movie or like the middle half of the movie, and kind of just it's like a full circle moment, and it's very intense and it's very emotional, and you get like why she's doing it, and I think Edward kind of sees that too, like, oh, Bella, because Bella's also been trying to make herself like known to Edward as I am like a strong person, like you're not believing me, like I can make my own decisions, even though like again she's 17, but you know we'll go past that.
We'll look past it.
Yeah, we'll look past it. But she's saying to her, like trying to make a point to him, like I'm strong, I'm capable, like I know what I want, I know what I'm doing. And the fact that he was being vulnerable and he was showing weakness and she was able to step in and be like, I got you. Like, I think in that moment, he was like, okay, like Bella has like transformed into this stronger person than she was when I first met her.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very well put. So I guess just to wrap this whole section up, the only two things out of this scene that I think are probably worth discussing, unless y'all have something else, is just like the Volturi coming and kind of all like the drama around that. I think Jane is like so freaking extra. I'm over her.
I love Dakota Fanning.
I do too. I love Jane. Like she's my other favorite. It's like her and Rosalie were always my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole part where Carlisle's like, if the Volturi knew about this, of course they would have stopped it. Right, Jane? And Jane's like, of course.
Duh.
Yeah.
But it's just like,
we don't know.
Yeah, she does it very well. So well that I'm just like, I hate you. And
I love her. Oh my god.
I mean, I love Dakota Fanning, but like Jane.
I love Jane. I love Jane.
Okay. I think she's evil.
Well, she is.
But then, yeah.
She's a badass. Yeah. Oh my god, are you kidding?
She's evil, but like it's cool.
Yeah.
It is cool. She's also tiny, which I think is very effective.
Yes.
And then Jacob gets hurt at the very end, saving Leah. And
that
Carla
whole
has to go.
thing, like where Bella like walks up and like hears him, like you can see the pain on Kristen Stewart's face that she like she's causing everyone around her so much pain, and there's nothing she can do about it. She can't fix it, and she
Yeah.
knows it's going to continue too.
Yeah. She is the problem. Like, she's the whole
Mhm.
reason that Victoria's coming in the first place, and like
It's
all
me.
this had to
Hi.
happen. Yeah.
I think that's one thing everyone can agree on, whether you've seen Twilight, whether you haven't seen Twilight, like if you're a fan or not a fan, you can agree. Bella has been the problem since day one. She's always been the
Yeah.
problem. Like,
Yep.
we see some
Mhm.
character development, but still, she is the problem.
Mhm.
I do like how at the end she kind of says, like, I've never fit in, like I don't belong, like I've always felt like I'm like stumbling through
step,
life.
yeah.
And you see that clear as day in this movie. Like, that girl
Mhm.
has something wrong with her.
Yep.
Okay, so we've gotten through like everything that I want to talk about.
Mhm.
Liz, Annika, is there like anything that we need to make sure we cover before we wrap it up?
I have one thing, but Annika, if you have anything, I'll
I'm
let you go
thinking,
first.
so you go ahead. Yeah.
So, actually, I have two things. So
Okay.
first, and we don't really like need to discuss this, but I just want to say,
Okay.
based on Jasper's backstory and assuming all the other Cullens know his backstory, there's no fucking way that Bella would have been the one to figure out that Victoria was behind the newborn army. There's just no way.
That was
There's
crazy.
no way.
There's some serious
Second,
plot holes in these books.
yeah. Second, her engagement ring, hideous.
Weird.
It looks like an old lady ring.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get it. It's old, but we couldn't have taken the diamonds and like made like a cute halo.
I
or
thought it
like
was supposed
put it
to be a
around.
giant diamond, not like a bunch of little diamonds.
I don't know, but it's not cute.
I did put in my notes like the ring, like just like
I don't think I would wear that.
I just feel like he's definitely had time to like create something.
A lifetime.
A literal lifetime, a century to figure this out. Like a nice ring, and maybe there's like some more in-depth like reasoning behind it, and I don't recall what that would be. But yeah. Like, first of all, we had 12 or so like failed proposals, and you finally get it right, and you're like, here's the ring, and she's like,
the ugliest thing you've ever seen.
I can't say no now, like I can't say no again, like especially when there's actually like a ring involved.
12 or so failed proposals. Wow.
I also do hate
that's all I have.
Yeah. I also hate that they were talking about like marriage in the beginning, and I think it was Bella who was like, well, marriage is just a piece of paper. And
honey,
I'm like,
honey,
it's if we're talking about someone who's like afraid of commitments because she's asking all these different questions, and then she asks Charlie later about like, well, do you think marriage is worth it? And he's like, yeah, like of course I do. Like, she's like processing like, is this commitment of marriage worth it? But meanwhile, she's like, I'm ready to be immortal for this guy. Like, I'm ready to give up everything for this one guy. But marriage, that's just a piece of paper. I'm like, that's
homegirl.
Yeah.
I think that really highlights, though, like what you've been getting at this whole time, Annika, like her age. Like, she's so young.
Yeah.
And like, yes, she's very mature, but at the same time, like these basic things about like what she values are not formed yet. And so that kind of goes into like why Edward like is so adamant, like, hey, don't be turned yet. Like, you're not ready. Like, you have so much more life to live. And I definitely agree. Like, between the ages of like 18 and 25, you change so much and grow so much and like really become, I think, the person that, you know, you really are, and like learn what you value. And Bella's just way too young. So young.
And maybe she's trying to like capture her youth and like her like her snatched body at 17 and like be like, yeah, that's the body I want for the rest of my life. And I'm like, I can respect that.
Same.
Yeah, who doesn't?
Yeah, of course. So I'm like, okay, I see that point. And then it's also like, of course, 17-year-olds can still make like valued decisions and like important decisions. But to your point, Courtney, like, and again, like what I have been saying is like, there's like a time between 18 and 25 is like, that's a lot of change. And she needs some time to like simmer and out.
Yeah.
Well, she doesn't. She decides to get married. And at the end of this movie, they end in the meadow and they're engaged and she puts her ring on and they're going to go tell Charlie. And that's how we end.
Poor Charlie.
The time for ratings court.
Yes. Annika, you are first. And so just as a reminder, we use Letterboxd rating scale. So it's 0 to 5 stars with half-star increments.
So I think I'm going to give it a 2.5. And I even feel like that might be a little high. But I think for me, it's like the nostalgic aspect of it for me. Like,
yeah.
I remember the hype around it. I was so into the books. I remember like the midnight premiere of Eclipse and like all of that. And just, I think watching back on the movies, it's like, oh, this is like, it's so nice to like rewatch this. And also just how much that set up for like other pieces of important things in pop culture, I feel like. So that's the reasoning behind my rating. But I will also say, I think it got knocked down a bit because looking back, while still nostalgic, I also feel like just like the relationship dynamic is so off.
Yeah.
I do not appreciate that. And then, of course, again, the theme that's been the entirety of all of this conversation is she's just too young to be making these massive choices.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Liz, what's your rating?
So, Annika, you're a tough critic. I give it a 5 out of 5 stars.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Again? I thought it was, listen, this is my second 5 out of 5 for the Twilight series. It's my favorite series, okay? Give me some slack here. But I thought this movie was actually like really well done. Like we talked about before, the acting like exponentially better. The way that it was directed and filmed was like you were watching almost like a superhero movie at some times with the fight scenes. They did a really good job of not like over explaining things and kind of leaving some things like up to your imagination while still also making sure you had all the information you needed. I just thought it was great. Also, shirtless Taylor Lautner, 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
It was very well shot, I will say, comparatively to the other movies. I think this was the first one you're like, oh, this is like HD. It looks nice. It's not like cringy.
I agree with that, but I think the sets in this movie are horrible. Like, I think they're
disagree. I thought they were all
very
really
unrealistic. No. I also gave this movie 2.5 stars. And the reason is because
y'all are killing me.
I know, but the problem is this is like the 5th Harry Potter movie. Like, it's like a climax, I guess, to the whole series, and like, but like not quite. Like, it's like right leading up to it, and it's just like a lot of explaining, and like it's hard to do that in a movie because you're trying to like explain and storytell as opposed to like actually like the story kind of speaking for itself. Like, it's just a lot of like boring parts, honestly. And then I thought it was really cringy. And the other thing too is I thought a lot of like the comedy and moments in the movie were done specifically for like that first theater watch that you have when you go to watch. And like from a rewatch standpoint, it's not as good because it's like kind of like in the newer Star Wars movies. Like, I think that the comedy doesn't hold up as well, but just my personal opinion.
In my humble opinion.
Yeah. I mean, a 2.5 star.
Like, what do I know? But
is like it's a respectable rating, I think, for a Twilight movie.
Halfway there.
And I mean, if you think about it, like from Rotten Tomatoes, like this movie got like a 49% on Rotten Tomatoes, and like it's tied with like 3 other of the Twilight movies, and then the other 2 got like 25%.
49? That's terrible.
It's really made for one purpose, and it's for like the Twihards, and that was it. It was like, how can we make more money off these vulnerable teen girls? And
they did their job.
Yeah, they did their job. They did their job. So that I'll give them 5 stars for. But the movie overall, like 2.5.
Yeah,
it's fair.
Okay. Well, Annika, this was beautiful. Your takes were amazing. I'm so happy that you were able to make it on. So just thank you so, so much for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was fun.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to say bye, Annika, but we're going to talk a little bit about how you can find us. So if you want to find the podcast, our socials, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Be Critics Podcast.
Thank you so much for checking us out. We'd appreciate it if you could leave us a rating or review. And if you love this podcast like we do, be sure to subscribe and follow. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts.
You can also find us on our website at becritics.com, or you can find all this information in the show notes for the episode.
All right. That's it. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye, guys.
Bye.